Welcome to episode 22 of the Slightly Greener Life. And this is actually my first interview today. And actually, the guest is me. So funny enough. But anyway, it's Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in September. And so I was talking to my amazing podcast producer, Kirsten Trammell from Swell Production House. And we were just talking and decided to do kind of like an interview style about my story and about my childhood cancer, because I've never really talked about it before. But I thought with last year being my 40-year anniversary. And I didn't really do anything last year, which maybe I'll get into a little bit, but thought that this would be a perfect time to maybe do that. So just want to introduce Kirsten Trammell again from Swell Production House. And thank you so much for doing this, Kirsten. I'm so excited to be doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to interview you. I know this is going to be a really beautiful conversation, and I'm excited to help really illuminate your story and hopefully inspire people and just be of support in the space of childhood cancer and really parenting and life in general.
All the good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Amazing. Well, this is going to be fun because I'm kind of like taking over your podcast and asking you all the questions. So, just as I started preparing for this interview with you, I started doing some research on childhood cancer in general. Just I didn't know too much about it and was really blown away by some of the information I was finding and specifically the prevalence of it. I know it sounds kind of like if you're not in it, this like mysterious thing that happens to some people. And globally, I found that a child is diagnosed with cancer every 80 seconds. So around the world, I mean, while we film this podcast, that's going to be probably roughly like 60 children and families are going to find out that
Oh,
they have
gosh.
cancer. So it is everywhere, and hopefully your story, I'm really excited to learn more about it, will be a beacon of hope for people. So would love to hear. I know you had a very specific type of cancer. If you can share what that was, and we can get started from there.
Okay. Sounds good. Um, yeah, about 2 weeks before I turned 7, I was diagnosed with, and I meant to look this up, acute lymphocytic or acute lymphoblastic, I can't remember, leukemia, so ALL. Um, and the way my parents really found out was because I had back pain, and then I remember having arm pain in my right arm and just being like, I can't raise my arm past midline, and that only lasted a few days. And then I went to go pick up my cat one day, and I just kind of collapsed, and that's when my parents knew that it was time to go to the doctor because it's I read somewhere too that it's really hard actually to diagnose childhood cancer.
Mm,
Um, because some of the symptoms too are just kind of strange, especially for a 7-year-old. But the average age of getting diagnosed is 8 years old, which
mhm.
is another fact I read recently. So, um, but I forget how it's the actual diagnosis too of or the rate of diagnosis for childhood cancer is actually I think they said 44% are not caught,
Wow.
which I was really shocked to read that too. I might have that stat just slightly wrong, but I think I just read that yesterday. So, um, yeah, just really different in kids, the way the symptoms show up.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I imagine as a kid, it's kind of challenging to know like when you're sick or kids just navigate being sick differently. Like they still
I
want to do
do.
all the things. And so you kind
Yeah.
of mentioned some of the things, but was there a moment when you were really like as a child, oh, something isn't right?
Yeah, I think it was probably with the arm, just not being able to lift my arm past like the midway. I just
Mhm.
remember kind of, I was
Yeah.
like, I can't raise it past this. It's kind of cool though, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't remember collapsing, picking up my cat. That's what my parents told me. I remember sitting in the doctor's office though, when they were finding out that it might be cancer. I was actually taken into the nurse's office to color, which she was a family friend. And, I loved her and I thought it was really cool. I got to go in there and color and, not knowing that my parents were like a couple rooms away, getting told that I think it was going to be one of a few different things, but they were pretty sure it was cancer. And it was actually my dad's childhood pediatrician who told them. So then I had got sent to the hospital across the street for more testing and was in the hospital for a few days. And again, I remember getting a lot of visitors and getting a lot of stuffed animals. It was pretty cool. And telling people like, if my tests come back clear, I get to go home. And, you know, they did not come back clear, obviously. So got rushed to another hospital right after that in the middle of a blizzard, I guess. So the doctors told my parents, no time to go home and pack. You need to get into Chicago like right now. So we drove in the middle of the blizzard to get there.
Wow. Wow. And just thinking about what that must have been like, kind of as you're describing like the coloring and some of the things
Mhm.
that you just like have that childhood memory. Looking back now as an adult, what do you see differently that you didn't, see when you were in it as a kid?
Oh, that's
In
such a
that,
great question.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know exactly how to answer that except for so happy I didn't know what was going on.
Mm,
You know, that phrase ignorance is bliss is so good because I think being told an adult would be much different than being told as a child because I really didn't know what was going on. I knew it was serious, but I think as a kid too, you just see everything through such a different lens. And kids are so they bounce back, they're resilient. Um, I've listened to a couple podcasts with some survivors too, recently because it's been hard for me to talk about it. It's been hard for me to research things. But I feel like I'm getting to a point now where I can. And they just say kids just kind of go through it and they don't complain. And I just remember going through it and I think I complained, but for the most part, it's like we don't know any different either.
mm,
So
mhm.
it's just kind of like you do what you got to do because what are you going to do? Refuse to? It's to me. Um, yeah. So I think it just makes your childhood a little different. But then again, we don't know any better. So I think just looking back through that lens of I really didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's so interesting that kind of being able to look back and see all of that. And even just listening to this as we get started, like as an adult being like, how can I learn something from this? And there is, you're so valid in talking about kind of like how that ignorance is bliss, or like not knowing any different, and how even as an adult sometimes it can be useful to, in some ways, perhaps kind of like reconnect with that childhood part of ourselves to be able to move through things or to survive.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's affected me differently too as I get older, which I think is really interesting because I went through a period of like not even thinking about it, and now it catches up with me a lot more than it used to.
Mm.
So, I kind of think the PTSD from that is real. I definitely have some quirks. Like if you come at my lower back where I had all those spinal taps, like,
Mm.
I always say you're gonna get punched in the face, but yeah, it's just just little things like that. Little things like that. But yeah, it's just different how you look at it as and especially being a parent now,
Mhm.
looking at it through the lens of being a parent and just being older and having more anxiety come back in and all the health anxiety I have. I have so much health anxiety that I haven't really talked about before, but last year I had a whole lot of it. Last year was my 40-year anniversary. I was diagnosed in 1982 and I lost my hair after COVID pneumonia. So I lost probably more than half the hair on the back of my head last year. And it was like 40 years to the month I lost it as a kid. So just remembering losing my hair as a child. And so last year I would just be working and TMI, I would just look down on my lap and there would just be clumps of hair and I didn't touch my head.
Mm.
So it's kind of a little bit of like, oh, taking me
Yeah.
back to my childhood and seeing the same thing. So last year was a really rough year, even though I wanted to do something to celebrate and commemorate it. I couldn't because as an adult, again, I think the anxiety has caught up. And it's
Yeah.
just so different how it affects you in different stages of life, I feel like.
Yeah, that's really fascinating that, you've been in, and we can get into this, you've been in recovery for, quite a while. And it is still something that sounds like just doesn't always go away, and it ebbs and flows and comes and goes. So was curious if you could walk us through some of the treatment that you received, because I know you had some kind of experimental stuff, and just,
Mhm.
as a kid, what is it like to go through things like chemo and this long-term treatment for a serious illness?
Well, again, I'm grateful that I didn't know. I just knew, oh, this kind of sucks. But I did 3 years of chemo. Um, and the interesting thing was back then the survival rate was 20%. And
Yeah.
so really low odds. So my parents got the chance though. They were lucky enough to get the choice to decide at the time they were doing trials. Um, if they would treat me with the current research or the current treatments, I should say, which had the 20% survival rate, or they could treat me through research, I guess, or trials. So I guess they input there's probably more to it than this, but the simple version is they, they input all of my information into a computer and the computer treated me. So the computer said 3 years of chemo and no radiation. So I was my doctor's first patient with no radiation. And then kind of followed the treatment plan from there. And then the computer actually got to say when I was cured, I believe. So I think it was after 9 years. So when I was around 16. Um, and the doctors had told my parents too that I have a few things or a couple things for me. Like I think that I was female gave me a better
Mhm.
chance.
Mhm.
Interestingly, I don't know why. Um, and then if I don't get pneumonia, I think was one of them, or definitely chickenpox. I know chickenpox was one. Um, and then chickenpox, I remember was going around school and I was actually going to go in and get a shot the next day. Turns out the next day I woke up with chickenpox.
Oh my gosh.
Um, yeah, and I don't remember all the factors that were in my favor, but I actually got chickenpox and pneumonia at the same time. So in the hospital for quite a while for that. And I think I might have been on a trial there too, but super grateful for the trial too, because again, being told not sure if you can have kids, and I have three amazing kids, and they're 19, 21, and 25 now, which I can't believe. But I'm grateful that I had that chance too, because now I've been able to have kids. And um there were some other interesting things too. They said I'd have a mouthful of cavities.
Mm.
I didn't get my first cavity until I was 30. So interestingly enough, um, some of the other side effects they said would probably happen is kind of like learning disabilities or having especially math be really hard, which really was hard for me. And I know in high school I was told I couldn't take certain math classes because I just wouldn't be able to. Um, but I have a photographic memory for numbers, which is really weird. So I can memorize any number, but I can't do anything with it. So, but I can add subtract like nobody's business really fast. Like you're not going to beat me on a time test, but anything else, nothing. So it's just really interesting too about some of the things that they said could happen that didn't. And, I just felt very lucky to be treated like with that kind of research.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're bringing up some really interesting points about how, you had this illness when your body and your brain is in such a massive state of development. When you're 7 years old through so 7 to 10 you're having chemo, is that correct?
Hmm.
Yeah. And so much of your body and your brain is still in such a state of development. So
Yeah.
it's I think I've never really thought about how that would impact someone. It's just like, oh, they're sick and then they get better. But as a kid, it impacts so much more, whether it's cancer or some other kind of young adult treatment. That's really, really interesting. And I know that in your book, you talked about, and everyone that's listening, go check out her book. It's amazing. And she does share some of the stories from her childhood cancer. But you talked about like missing birthday parties and slumber parties in school and, having to stay in at recess. So I'm just curious, like, how was it for you to miss all of those things as a kid? I know you mentioned already kind of that you didn't know any different, but like in those instances, how did that shift your childhood?
Um, I it was, of course, hard missing out on a lot of those parties and everything. The staying in at recess was kind of cool though, because I got to pick someone to stay in with me every time. So everybody wanted to be that person that stayed in. So that was pretty neat. Like they got
Mm.
to take turns. Um, so that was good. But again, I didn't know any better. So and I think another really good thing too is that the school was very supportive and let the parents and the students know what was going on, because back in 1982, it was not very prevalent. So when you see this little bald kid running around, it's, it's kind of like, I know that some kids have very negative experiences with it. I feel very blessed that, again, the principal of our school was amazing. The teachers were so great at explaining to the kids and the parents too. So even though I did get left out of a lot of that and couldn't go to a lot of parties, I don't really feel like I missed out on the friendships or anything. So, because I was very lucky that people knew what was going on. And I think that's really important too, is if you know someone or you have a student who's different in any way, whether it's cancer or anything, to explain what's going on, because it makes it so much less scary for the other kids too.
Yeah. Yeah, I know in researching to connect with you about all of this, I was seeing that there's a lot of data. There's the Children's Cancer and Leukemia Group found that roughly 35% of children, so approximately 1 in 3 children are bullied based upon their illness. And so
Wow.
beautiful that you didn't have to have that experience. And also it sounds like having a school that's communicating, having teachers
Mhm.
that are just letting everyone know ahead of time, like that clear communication sounds like it was really effective in eliminating some of that for you.
Yeah, especially I think with kids that young too, because kids that young don't know what cancer is. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
know and I had it. So when you take that mystery away, you take away a lot of um their imagination too, because they're probably also acting out because they don't know what to do. So um,
Mm.
when I wasn't
Yeah.
in school, I did get a few things said um that I didn't love, but again, to have that supportive school community can change everything, I feel like, for a child, or um, you know, supportive friends and supportive families around you. I think that is so important, not only for the child, but for the child's entire family too, because it affects them so much also.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I did want to talk to you about is just the impact that this had not only on you, but your family and the family system. And I know you have siblings and like that siblings of children, siblings that have siblings
Uh-huh.
with a childhood illness also kind of have a really different upbringing and experience of their own. So I'm curious if you've had conversations with your siblings about this or how that was from your perspective for them along the
No,
way.
not really. Again, because it's hard for me to talk about. So I haven't, but I have always understood that it was hard. My sister was with my grandparents a lot when I was in and out of the hospitals. And of course, it's got to be hard when one is getting a lot of attention. Um, but speaking as the child who got the attention, I would have rather have been normal rather than have gone through all that. So, um, and I've kind of seen it with my own kids too, with um, one of mine that has some needs some different attention also. So, trying to explain to my other kids too that, you know, there's a reason that we have to parent a little bit differently. And and I totally understand because I was on the side of it too when I was younger, but just know that we would rather be normal than going through this and not having this special treatment or having to be treated or parented differently. It's no matter what it is, whether it's a cancer, a learning disability, or, any kind of illness, anything like that.
Mhm.
But it is important to remember the siblings too, because they're going through it just as much.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess, like, speaking to the parents that might be tuning in, if one of their and even if it's, something big like childhood cancer or something smaller along the way of, like, just understanding that you have to parent differently, what is something that you think would be supportive for parents to either say or do with their kids that might not be in this space of being ill?
Yeah, it's hard to know what to say. Again,
Mm.
just explaining that this is why, this is what's going on, and this is why this needs to be we need to treat, your sibling differently. Um, and then just making sure too that, because again, if they don't understand what's going on, they're gonna get upset. It'd be really easy to get upset to be like, well, it's okay for her to get these grades and I can't, or, you know, um, oh, she gets to stay up a little bit later tonight because she's not feeling well and I have to go to bed because I have school in the morning. I mean, that's really hard to navigate. Um, so also just making sure that you're spending extra time with that child too. I think, like, just even if it's as simple as like taking them out for ice cream, or just bring ice cream home and just sit with them, and making sure that they know that their feelings are valid too, because even if they're upset, they have valid feelings, and to let them
Yeah.
know that you understand and you're there for them. And it's hard on the whole family.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting thinking about this, understanding like as, we've been kids of like how kids think about things and see things. And there's kind of like, even when the way that they talk about things, sometimes kids just say the most honest things,
Mhm.
which is so beautiful. And also like that would be challenging for them to have those experiences that feel really unfair and not, unless they're spoken about, not know how they're impacting everyone. Um, so I'm curious about the moment when you were, I don't know, like air quotes, like cured, or when you moved into remission, or and you said it, the computer told you after 9 years that you were well. I guess, was there a moment when you yourself felt like I'm okay, like this is behind me, or like when that kind of shifted for you?
I think it would be, I don't know. I kind of remember being told I was cured. I was like, oh, finally. It was kind of just the thing
Mhm.
for me, because I had felt okay for a while. It was just different because I was going in for treatments still. So I went,
Mm.
you know, every week to every 3 months, I believe, then every 6 months, then once a year. And then again, I just think kids are so resilient and our kids' brains are wired differently. They don't see things like an adult does. So for me, I'm like, it's about time type of thing because
Yeah.
I was already in sports. I was doing a lot of things. I was really lucky that I had a really normal childhood despite this. So I think that would be good for parents and families to know too, is like keep it as normal as possible. So I was still going out for sports. I wasn't great at them, but just to keep me busy and make me feel normal and just have a, everyday life, just have those normal moments. So
Yeah.
again, because I think the brains are wired so differently, we don't see things like I would as an adult
Mhm.
that, um, yeah, I just, it wasn't as, I mean, it was a big deal to me, but I had already been feeling pretty good. So I think that's kind of the difference too when it comes to children.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah. And as you kind of moved into becoming an adult, I'm really wondering if, looking back and understanding everything that your parents were navigating and dealing with, if,
Mhm.
you know, looking at it from like an adult mindset now, like what would you say to parents whose children might be suffering from a chronic illness?
Oh, that's such a great question too. That's a hard one. Um, Gosh, again, I would say just keep it as normal as you can. My parents kept it very normal. I don't know how they did it. Um, I didn't see a whole lot of not that I didn't see a lot of emotion. I saw emotion, but I really feel like we just tried to keep it as normal as possible. Like, family dinners, going out. We went on more vacations probably than we normally would have. Just things like that, just to have the family be together, keep those normal moments. Um, yeah, this is a really hard one to answer. It took up a big chunk of my childhood. Like I even I had to go to the hospital for yearly checkups until I was 21. So it just played a huge role in my childhood. But um, as a parent, oh my gosh, I think just keeping a sense of normalcy, whatever that is for your family, because everybody's is so different, would probably be the best thing I can say.
No, that's beautiful. And like, really, it sounds like a lot of like creating as much maybe consistency and
Hmm.
presence in
That's a
that
good word.
family. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really powerful. Well, so now you have three beautiful children of your own. And I know that, as you said earlier, that that was something that was maybe even not going to be possible for you given the type of cancer that you had and the potential treatment you were going to receive. So, being a parent now, I
Hmm.
would love to like learn a little bit more about kind of the connection between having this childhood experience and the work that you do now, because I know that so much of it is kind of led from this and led from your experiences. So if you could like
Hmm.
explain that a little bit to everyone, I think it's really, really, really fascinating.
Oh, sure. Um, well, I've always told the story that when my son was in second grade back in 2006 now, which I cannot believe, he started having attention issues in school, which I had kind of seen at home, but the teacher called me in and they wanted to test him maybe for ADHD. And I don't know what it was in the back of my head, but I had always grown up being told, be careful what you eat, be careful what you do, type of thing with the cancer. So there was just something in the back of my head that was just saying, I wonder if it's something in our diet or in our home that could be contributing to these symptoms that maybe I could, stop doing and that could get rid of the symptoms. So I just asked the teacher for a little bit of time to do some research. I'm not against medicating if we would have needed it back then, that would have been the route we take. But I was lucky enough. I went home and did the research, took a couple things out of his diet. I took out artificial colors and benzoate preservatives and like sodium benzoate and went back to school, I think about 3 weeks later. And she said, we don't need to test him anymore. The symptoms have lessened enough.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that good of results. So
Yeah.
I was kind of hooked. And then I went home and I'm like, I'm just going to do some more research because found out kind of a nerd when it comes to that stuff. I loved doing it. So the research to me, and it wasn't as easy back then either, the online back in 2006, it wasn't as readily available. But I realized too, it's not just what you put on your body or in your body, it's what you put on your body. It's even your
Mm.
cleaning products. And I've always been a candle person. So oh, that was a hard one. So learning that things like candles, even things you're breathing in or the furniture you have, all of it can contribute to so many different things. And then I opened an online store because what I did was I would go shopping and I'd buy all these natural products and I'd get home and find out, oh, there's things they didn't have to put on in the ingredient list and it says natural, but it's not. And I'd waste all this money. So started that store and had a lot of people coming to me asking me questions. Um, and then I'm like, you know what? I really want to understand how these things act in the body. So I went back to school and got a master's degree in holistic nutrition and then went on to become board certified because I saw what it did for my family. Um, and I have a daughter with learning disabilities. So to me, and especially with what I went through as a child, I really started out strong talking about kids and toxins because they're also more susceptible to the health effects because again, their important body systems are developing. Some of these are toxic to the brain and nervous system. And I just want to help families get the best, healthiest jumpstart for their kids that they can have.
Yeah. Wow. I know you've talked to me a little bit about this before, but you hearing it again, it's just so powerful to think about how our children are truly like people say they're like sponges, but they're sponges like in all of these different ways too, in terms of
Right.
what chemicals they're exposed to and what they're breathing in and taking into their bodies. And when they're growing and developing, it's just so, so impactful. And it's incredible that removing two ingredients from your son's life had such a profound impact on his ability to show up in the classroom and be present. So it sounds like you've created this ability to look at things kind of from multiple different angles.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's just who you are or if that's a result of kind of how you grew up and having to get creative in how you lived through cancer or what that comes from, but it's really
Yeah.
incredible to kind of like get into your mind for a moment and hear how you explored and really took on being an investigator and having, you know, I think in health there's like this level of self-responsibility that we all have to take on. So it's incredible that you've done that for your family and yourself and now, sharing that with the world as well.
Oh, well, thank you. And yeah, I am, wasn't the best experience, but I'm grateful for it because I really feel too like I do see things through a different lens and I know when my daughter was going she's older now, she's out of school, but the school years were so hard for her and when she was diagnosed with learning disabilities, that was so tough too because you just don't want to, your kids to have that tough road ahead of them. But what I really realized, and I've done some talks on this too, is that what is the difference between childhood cancer and a learning disability? Because they're both things that go wrong in the body. Like a cancer is a change in DNA or a mutation in DNA, and a learning disability is something that goes differently in the brain. It's just wired differently. And so I think right away, though, and I used to teach also, that was my original degree. So I went through the elementary education classes and the special ed classes. And what I've realized, and I think what the childhood cancer made me realize too, is like they're just different things that are going wrong in the body. And why is one stigmatized over the other? Like the learning disabilities that gets so stigmatized in school and from other kids and from so many different angles. Um, but really, they're both just things that go differently in the body. And um, so what I did was I really dug into what are the advantages of these learning disabilities and dyslexia
Mm.
specifically. And what I found is like, oh, it's exciting. It's not in school necessarily. It makes it tough, but it can be a gift. And I really think that neurodiversity is such a gift because if we all thought the same and did the same, this would be a really boring place. And the stuff that she has always come up with all through her life is just like so creative and so neat to see. So I really feel like I'm grateful to what I went through as a child so that I could look through things through that lens to give me that different lens for helping my kids too and helping them understand when, even when something's going on with someone else too, that they can kind of see through that lens. Because I feel like we really need to get rid of a lot of stigma that is going around on a lot of these things because so many people are going through so much right now. And we really should be able to try to look through it through a different lens and really through empathy and understanding.
Mm. Yes, yeah. I think about it in terms of, like if you have a broken arm, you go to the doctor right away and like you have a cast and everyone wants to sign it and like it's fine. And then it's like if your brain, I don't want to say if your brain has a fracture, figuratively or something like
Right.
that, it's you don't want to tell anyone and you don't want to address it. And it's like you can, like going to the doctor, doing the things to get healthy again. It's like
Hmm.
you're so true. There's such stigmas about these things, and certain labels are accepted and other labels aren't. And it's beautiful to hear how you've been able to just like look at something and still be able to address the challenges while also finding what's really beautiful and powerful in having that as well. Um, yeah, it's just to share my mom was a special education teacher for like 35 years. And so she worked with children with a wide range of disabilities. And, she said that some of them have these incredible gifts that
Hmm.
that everyone else really doesn't. And like that is such a gift and so beautiful for them to be able to have that despite everything else that's going on. So I always think about that. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
that what you're sharing is something that we can all take away and think about ourselves of what labels do we put on ourselves or other people that maybe we could shift a little differently.
That's true. Or even what I realized too is I talked about my anxiety a few years ago when it really started up. We moved and that just set off my anxiety sky high. And so I disappeared for a little while and then I kind of came back in. I was dipping my toe back into video and just being like, so anxiety. I get it now, and to me, it's just I got so much support around that. And so I feel like when you're ready to share your story, if you do, it's really surprising to see the support you get in other people that feel like, oh, she's going through it. I'm going through it. And and she's coming out on the other side, even though it
Mhm.
creeps back in big time for me. It's not something that necessarily always goes away, but I feel like other people can share their stories to help other people when you come out on the other side of it a little bit, because there's times where we're going through things we're not ready to share. And that's when you shouldn't share. But when you are strong enough, it's really surprising how many other people come forward and say, me too. I also have anxiety. And last year, when my anxiety was sky high, I had never told anybody how bad my health anxiety was. But it got so bad, I had to go into a doctor and be like, help me. I don't even want to go to the doctor. Like, I couldn't go. So, but I got a lot of support around that. The doctor was amazing about it. And, to me, it's like, oh, if I would have just kept that bottled up, I don't know. I just would have been a ball of nerves and rocking in a corner, not knowing what to do because it was that bad. So,
Yeah.
but reaching out and getting that support when you need it, there's no shame in it. It's so necessary and so needed to do because there's so many of these things that we can't get through alone and that we shouldn't try to either.
Yeah. Yeah. And you bring up like this topic of sharing your experience. And I know you said that last year, your 40 years, and you are kind of like in a very different place with everything. And as you just kind of described a little bit as well. So, like for anyone that's listening that might have an experience or a story that maybe one day they would want to share, how did you know that you were ready? I think that just in the world of social media and everything, sometimes people question like, is this something, am I sharing this like to support myself or to empower people or like just understanding like when you might be ready to.
Oh, yeah, I love that. I think there's different levels of sharing. So I already had, a platform with this business and everything too. So I just kind of did it on a couple of, I think, Facebook lives, or even just, I think one I just recorded and I'm like, if I hate it, I can take it down. But I knew it would help people because of the stuff I've talked about before. But again, on a personal level, I don't think my husband and my kids, and definitely not my parents, knew what I had been going through. So, um, I just got to the point where I got so bad last year, I had to reach out and tell everybody, like, no, this is really bad. Like, I'm really not doing well. Some days I can't get off the couch. I watched a lot of movies and, um, so I think there's just different levels of, you don't have to come out and do it on a Facebook Live. You don't have to come out and do it in an email newsletter. You can do it to your own family. You can do it to friends and family. And that sometimes that's enough. But the way I got started a while ago was my amazing mentors Jen Gottlieb and Chris Winfield. I met Chris in an event, and I really didn't have a business back then. It's not what it was now. And I was kind of like, yeah, I kind of do this and kind of do that. And, I had cancer as a child, and now I do toxins. So parents would have to go through the same thing. And he looked at me and he's like, whoa, he's like, he said, you're being selfish. And I was like, oh my God. He goes, you have a responsibility to get the information out there. So, um, that's when I really started to go forward with my business the way it is now, because I'm like, I do have this information. It is important. I do have to get it out on a bigger platform, even though myself, I'm not super comfortable necessarily with being the face of it, but I feel like my fear is stronger than, or my message is stronger than my fear, I should say. Sometimes my fear is stronger than my
Mm.
message, but my message is stronger than my fear. So to
Yeah.
get that information out is important to me. And then during these times where I do kind of disappear a little bit, like last year, it's okay to do that. You know, reach
Mhm.
out to whoever you can in your immediate family or in your support group, and that's fine. And if you do somehow have a platform or anything like that, do that when you're ready. But always just make sure you're ready and that you feel better about it. You'll know when it's time, because if you're in the middle of it, I almost don't think you can do it,
Mm.
if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Mhm. Yes, and I love that that your message is larger than your fear. That's so beautiful and such like a mantra to perhaps say to ourselves in those moments when we are toggling between sharing and not sharing from a place of really having that sense of responsibility to share. That's incredible. And one thing that I do want to just acknowledge and ask you about is, you have this capacity to see such good. And just in the time that we've been able to spend getting to know each other and working together, you are always coming into things, no matter what, with such beautiful energy and vibrancy and aliveness.
Oh,
And,
thank you.
I find it, it's interesting. You come into this world with a 20% chance of surviving as a child. And so, it's just really inspiring to know that you are the way that you are and that you show up and have this passion and this mission that is so beautiful and powerful. And I'm curious, like, what has helped make you this way? Like, how can people, when they're in a hard moment, be able to, step into it with this heart and this like power and joy that you have?
Well, first of all, thank you. Oh my gosh, those kind of words. Oh my gosh. I was like, who are you talking about? No. um, Thank you so much for that. Um, I, I wish I had a great answer for that. I think it's just, again, having that normal childhood despite what was going on. And when I was little, I really realized having a sense of humor about things is really important. And I think that's when it really developed too, because I'm like, if I can make my parents laugh during this, and the doctors sometimes too, like even now going to the doctor, sometimes it's like, we just laugh the whole time. I've got a great supportive doctor, and it's like, I'll just make jokes the whole time. She'll make jokes because I just kind of have the motto, if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. So, um, but I mean, I realized too, some of those treatments that I was going through, they were so painful, but if you can get a little laugh or find a little bit of the bright side, everything does seem to get a little bit lighter and a little bit better. So if we can kind of look at a lens through that, um, plus not necessarily taking to heart everything that's said.
Yeah.
Being told I'd have a mouthful of cavities, told I'd have learning disabilities, math, yes, but other things like that. If we just don't take that to heart, because if we take that in, that's probably what's going to happen.
Mhm.
Um, but I was in gifted classes, like gifted science and gifted English and things like that. And I didn't have the mouthful of cavities. So I kind of think if we can keep a sense of humor about things and maybe not take things so much to heart, um, just keeping that positive attitude, because I think if you have the positive attitude and don't think like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have so many learning disabilities, or I'm going to have so much of this, whatever long-term effect they're saying I'm going to have, then that can take you down that road. So if you just kind of keep it light, keep a good attitude, and look for the bright side, you will see the bright side. You will see what you're looking for. So make sure it's positive.
Oh my goodness, that's so beautiful. Yeah. I always feel like whatever you're looking for, you're going to find.
Mhm.
So why not look for the humor and the brightness and the lightness in life? So that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of this.
Oh, thank
Is there
you.
anything that I haven't asked you that you want to share, be it about childhood cancer, especially given this special month? Yeah, please. please share with us?
Oh, sure. I put some notes. Let's see, just really quick too, that there's just such little funding for it. So I think it's not just in the month of September, but we should be aware of it. Plus, a lot of the things that we do to prevent childhood cancer can prevent so many things for all of us down the road, autoimmune conditions, things like that. But oh, here's my notes. The most current standard treatments for pediatric cancer were approved 32 years ago. So many before the mid 1980s. And then another thing too, around 2/3 of childhood cancer survivors develop a chronic health condition or late health effects from treatment by the age of like 45 to 50. And a lot of the treatments are based off of adult research, which adults' bodies are totally different than kids. And that's why so many kids have so many long-term effects. And only 4% of government cancer research budgets go to childhood cancer research. So I feel like if we can support it, because whether it affects our family or not, the way cancer rates are going now, it's going to affect most likely, unfortunately, someone we know. So it's important to take these steps and just be aware. Because I really feel too, like the children, like for me getting older, it's just, it's something that affects you your whole life, and it affects adults too. So, um, yeah, just raising awareness and taking care of our health, I guess, is something that's important.
Totally. Oh my
Totally
goodness.
super important.
Yes. I'm like, we all need to go support, donate, contribute, speak, share because it's so true. Since we've been recording this, as we said in the beginning, s- roughly 50 to 60 families and children found out that they had cancer. So knowing the long-term effects, and this is wild knowing that the later life effects and just like impacting you and everyone around you your entire life. This is truly a powerful and important cause to support. So I know we're
Mhm.
going to put info in the show notes for how to get connected with you more, and then also how to get in support of childhood cancer research and funding and all of the things. Okay, I'm gonna
Yeah.
stop being in control of your
Oh
podcast
no, you're
and
so good. You have
give
no
it
idea how
back
much I
to you.
appreciated this. Oh my
So
gosh.
thank
Oh,
you so much for being open and sharing your story today. And it's truly inspiring to work with you, to hear what you have to share, and to know that you're really doing incredible work with such a powerful and important mission. So I know myself and everyone listening, we're so grateful for you.
oh gosh. And thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate this. And thank you for giving me a chance to share my story. And yeah, just can't thank you enough.
Yay,
So
amazing.
yeah, just want to thank everyone for tuning in. And I'll see you next week for episode 23. See you next week.